Welcome back to the Swing Factory Golf Show. I'm Justin, and this is Don Peterson, and we figured we would continue on with our show last week and continue to talk about your career a little bit more and what you're actually doing here at the Swing Factory. So
sure. You know, what I've tried to do is set up a circuit training here, right? Because I have this system that I started years ago where I found that it's easier to take the club out of someone's hand and take the ball away and train motion. So what I'm trying to do is set up a system of training.
Right.
And, you know, I came up with drills. One of them is called punch bowl drill, and I've got medicine balls, I've got T-ball, rubber bands. I use a lot of rubber bands. You know, mirrors we want people to see, and obviously we videotape. So it's kind of like, you know, I make the reference to Karate Kid all the time, the movie. Wax on, wax off, and paint the fence. So, you know, that famous teacher Miyagi, he taught Daniel how to do karate through motion, and actually other drills and exercises, sanding decks and waxing cars and things like that. So what we do is kind of the same thing here. So I've set up a whole circuit, and we take people through the circuit, and it's an easier way to learn golf. And then when you put the club and the ball back, people are able to do what we want them to do.
So what do you think specifically makes, you know, taking the club out of the hand so effective?
Well, you know, if here's the problem. A lot of people start golf wrong, right? So if you put a small golf ball down on the ground and you give them a golf club, it's was it Winston Churchill said it's equipment ill adapted for the purpose or whatever. I don't know the whole quote, but it's a hard thing to do. So what we find is people try to hit a golf ball off the ground, and they do it with an improper motion. So we're allowing them to start improperly. And I equate it to you know, something like gymnastics. You know, if someone walked in, if I were a gymnastics teacher and someone walked into me and they said, "Hey, I want to learn how to do a double somersault on the 4-inch beam," I wouldn't say, "Hey, come on over, I've got a 4-inch beam right here, hop up on there and show me what you can do," right? We wouldn't do that because it's dangerous.
Yeah.
Now, the thing about golf is it's not dangerous. You can give someone a golf ball and a golf club, and they're not probably going to hurt themselves.
Right.
But it doesn't hurt, it doesn't help them psychologically, physically. We're in essence doing the same thing.
And it doesn't mean that a poor motion isn't a step backwards. You know, every time you make a incorrect motion, you know, normally talking about sequencing, that's a step backwards.
Right, and that's what you have to do then. And that's why taking the club and the ball away works for people who already have adapted a bad style or a bad method of swinging. If you take the club and the ball away, it gives you a chance to retrain them.
Yeah. So, you know, I love the way you teach. You know, I've seen a lot of different things that kind of transfer really well to the golf swing. And, you know, one of my favorites is, and I've seen you use this a lot, is the T-ball drill.
Right.
You know, where you take the arms out of the equation and just teach people how to turn their hips.
I think it's interesting. You know, Davis Love is, I don't know if he's the only player to win as a senior on the regular PGA Tour. He turned 50. I remember he won just shortly after he turned 50 years old. And they did a whole, you know, Golf Channel did a whole thing about his swing, and they asked him some questions. One of the things he talked about, he always lifts his left heel. So he has, you know, kind of old school footwork, I guess, is what they were referring to on the Golf Channel. Yeah. And they asked him about it, and he says, well, the golf swing is from the ground. It comes from the ground up. You feel the golf swing through your feet. And he basically almost said that he swung with his feet or used his feet to swing. And I actually can equate with that. When I swing my best, I feel like I'm using the ground really well. And I remember when I was a kid, the first few tournaments I went to play in, I hated how I struck the ball, and I went away walking off the golf course thinking to myself, God, I felt like I was off the ground all day long. It's like I had no leverage, no control.
No connection.
No connection to the ground, and that's a bad way to swing a golf club and a bad way to try to get around a golf course.
Oh, yeah, no kidding.
So
I mean, it's one of those things where it's not even only in golf. Every single rotary activity has that same sort of sequencing that starts from the ground up. Right. Whether you're throwing a baseball or swinging a baseball bat, obviously, same motion.
Right. So going back to the T-ball, you know, what I did was I'm taking the swinging of the club away, and really I'm attaching the bat right to the core, which is the, you know, I usually kind of have them stick it right out of their belly button, which is close to their their hips or their waistline, which is, center of your core, your mass. So then you learn to move the bat back and forth to hit a ball. And then that's one of the other things I always tell people: don't hit the golf ball with your hands, and don't hit it with your arms or your shoulders. Hit with your core, hit with your stomach or your hips. Right.
Right. And a lot of the way they talk in TPI is that you're trying to train in disassociation. You want to disassociate your pelvis from your torso, from your arm to your hands to the club shaft, because you want to fire them separately.
Yeah.
And you want to have that nice sequence that produces a good golf shot.
Yeah. And I think it's, the other thing I would say about that is a lot of golfers, and you and I talked about this the other day, about timing. And I remember when I went down and played on the mini tours, my golf swing wasn't too good. I was a talented kid, I think. I had a good short game, good putting. But I hit the golf ball, and it's hard for me to keep it on the golf course. I hit it fairly long.
Right.
But every time I took a lesson, the golf pro said, well, your swing looks great. You just have to work on your timing, right? And now that I've, my 35, 40 years of teaching and training and understanding the golf swing, now what I tell people is I don't want timing in my golf swing.
It's
and I
kind
don't
of a
want to work
cop-out.
on it. Yeah, I want to get timing out of my swing. I want perfect sequence. So timing is something you want to eliminate from your golf swing.
Right. And how would you suggest doing that?
Obviously what we have to do is we have to train ourselves to use the body in the correct sequence, like you said.
Right.
Use the ground, use leverage, but a lot of what the golf swing is about getting the club in the right positions too, and not just the club. You got to get your arms, elbows, wrists.
Right.
There's a lot of things that have to be in proper position in order for you to make a good golf shot.
So going back to Davis Love, would you teach bringing your left heel off the ground?
In the beginning, almost everybody. I try to teach over-exaggeration in the beginning, and then you look at a child, and when they pick up a golf club, it's kind of heavy. Mm-hmm. So what they do is you'll see them; they'll use their body to try to help get the club back, because they can't just lift it and pull it down. Now, with modern-day clubs and technology, it's kind of funny. Now they're making U.S. Kids clubs, and another sponsor of ours. But U.S. Kids golf clubs, and they're made here locally. They're made lighter weight, so now kids can use their arms and probably get away without using their body. So I wonder sometimes, is that I know they can learn to play better with the smaller clubs because they can hit the ball further and they're lighter and they can get more club head speed. But I kind of like the idea of them learning to use their body in the beginning stages.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of mixed feelings about the old heavy clubs that that's how I learned. Even though I am a bit younger than you, I'm sure you learned that way too.
Oh yeah.
But it does ingrain some bad habits. I'd imagine.
I'm sure for a lot of people it does, and there's probably some kids that it didn't.
Right.
It probably helped them. So there's. Does that mean that you weight train with kids? Probably not. But I think when you look at kids, you want to get them using their core and their big muscles, just like you see on the tour. And the sooner you get them doing that in the beginning, the better off they're going to be.
I think when talking about juniors, it's really important to get them as explosive as possible and teaching them other athletic qualities that are used in the golf swing. I preach specificity a lot. When you want to get better at golf, don't try to stray away from the swing a lot. But I feel like you need to find these unmissable movements, stuff like the punch bowl, stuff like the T-ball drill, where you can do it correctly, because a golf swing is very complex.
Right.
And when you do it correctly, you keep on taking steps forward.
That's right.
And the better athlete you are, the more you're going to take steps forward in your overall golfing career than steps backwards. Right. So if you're a really one-dimensional athlete as a kid, you're not going to be able to make swing changes as an adult.
Right. Yeah, I think John Jacobs, he turned 90, that was a year or two ago, and they had a big article about him. And one of the things he said was, in the golf swing, there's a couple things he can tell you for sure about teaching and training golf. He goes, if you start doing something wrong in your golf swing, it's going to cause more things to go wrong.
Right.
But on the other side of that, if you start doing something right in your golf swing, it's going to cause other things to go right.
Yeah.
So going back to my teaching style, one of the things that I've always found is if I can get things to happen correctly with starting from the ground. And I always say you want to start from the ground and work up, and you want to start from the inside and work out.
Right.
And you want to use the big muscles and then work outwards to the smaller muscles. Yeah. So if you do those three things, you're going to have a more efficient golf swing, and chances are you're going to learn to play better as well.
Right, right. Yeah, so I know you have a product called the
golfer's tee box is what I'm about ready to launch. And basically, it's I had a lot of success training people off the side of a hill. So we have steep golfers, right? People who swing their arms very high, and it causes tilting. So if you have someone who's tilting in the golf swing, lifting the club, then they're going to have a lot of too much steepness on the downswing as well, and probably not very solid hits. Not going to be shallow through the ball like all the tour players are preaching nowadays, right? So what I found was if I could put people on the side of a hill, but going back years ago, there was no product or anything. So we just went over to the side of the tee and we would put the ball about a foot above someone's stance, their feet, and we'd have them hit baseball swings.
And I'd imagine that worked great for a slicer.
It did. Yeah. It's kind of funny. The funny thing is that you think about that, that's for high handicappers, and you'd only do that to beginners. Well, I had Tim Simpson hitting off the side of a hill. Yeah. And it's a long story, but it's a good one, so I'll tell it to you real quick. Tim Simpson was out at Harbor Club when I was out there, and he was struggling. He just had Lyme's disease, and so he's struggling with his swing, and he's kind of coming over the top and hitting kind of a weak fade. So I was a new pro out there, and he says, come out and take a look. So I watched him hit golf balls for about 10 minutes, and he goes, what do you think? And I said, I think you're coming over it a little bit. And he goes, yeah. He says, I went to Flick, and he told me this, and Byron Nelson, he told me that. He goes, what do you think I ought to do? And I said, I think you ought to strengthen your grip, and I think you ought to close your stance, and I think you ought to hit the side of a hill for a week. And he looks at me real cold, and you got to know Tim. He goes, I ain't going to do that. Right? So about a week goes by, and he calls me up, and at the time Butch Harmon was teaching Greg Norman and Tiger Woods. Right. Nobody knew who Tiger was back then. This was quite a while back. But Tim wanted to send a videotape off to Butch Harmon and see what he had to say. So he has me videotape him, and we send it out. A couple weeks goes by, and I'm in the pro shop. Tim's in Atlanta. He calls me up. It's raining outside. He goes, Pro, what are you doing? I said, getting ready to close up the shop. And he goes, don't close the range. I'm going to drive out there. He wanted to hit some balls. He goes, I got my tape back from Harmon. I said, yeah, what did he say? And he said, he told me to close my stance and strengthen my grip and hit off the side of a hill for a week. And he goes, Don, I've been around golf for 20-some years, and he goes, I've never heard anybody say that. And within a week, he says, I heard two teaching pros tell me to do that. So Tim Simpson, one of the best ball strikers in the world, hit off the side of a hill for a week or two, went back to tour school and shot 66, 67, 66, 67, and made it through, got his tour card.
If you want to get technical about it, he was just ingraining a motor pattern,
That's right.
He was ingraining a draw swing.
That's right.
And obviously, closing your stance and strengthening your grip is gonna produce a draw. But, I think swinging off the side of the hill is just a great way to do it.
Yeah, so you talk about exaggeration in golf, and you always have to kind of exaggerate the opposite of what you're doing wrong, So going back to the boxing, it's an elevated training aid. You don't have to go find the side of a hill, and you can set it up in your, if you have a garage or if you have a hitting room in your house, you can set it up there. We send some tools in the box. Right. So it's a neat little training aid to get you more rotation in your swing, maybe stop you from tilting, stop you from swaying or sliding your hips. It does a lot of things. So you just raise it up in the air. You learn to hit the golf ball at knee high, and then you lower it down to shin high, and then you lower it down to ankle high, and then you lower it down to the ground and go back to a regular golf ball.
I think, I'd imagine that's a great tool for juniors. Because, and get those motor patterns in early,
Well, you said that because you saw me using it with the junior the other day, I'm sure.
Right, right.
And thanks. But, yeah, it did. I had this kid really upright, lifting his arms, and I had him hit off the box for about 15 minutes, and we just lowered it down to the ground. And I think there's some videos on YouTube where I show that, so you can check those out. But yeah, it works. It works.
Yeah, and it's something you need to be consistent with. You can't just hit one, have one range session where you're hitting off the box.
Right.
Then you go back and you probably hit the ball good for a couple of sessions, and then eventually you'll get back to your old pattern. So you need to be consistent with it. Do you have any like programs or any step-by-step type deals that go along with the box?
What we're working on right now is it's going to be a subscription type website, and obviously there's tons of models like that out there, and we're just kind of following the tribe, so to speak. But yeah, I've been putting YouTube videos out for quite a while now, and I've got a whole. I wrote a book called The Baseball Golf Swing Method. Again, that was a method of swinging on one plane and obviously learning to hit off of the elevated table. Mm-hmm. So the baseball golf, but then the baseball golf was actually, I think I talked about this before, it was a step-by-step procedural manual, and so I actually went back and now it's called the Miyagi Golf Training System.
Right,
so,
right.
So that's part of the series. So if you want to learn how to use the tools in the box, you go online and watch the videos.
Yeah, and I think we talked about that a little bit on the last episode. So.
Right.
And, it's a great system. All right, so welcome back. We were just talking about the golfer's tee box a little bit and how to cure a slice by hitting off the side hill lie. And, I kind of want to go back, take a couple steps back and talk a little bit more about how you learned about training all this stuff. Where did you get all your information and what's your background as far as learning the swing and how people move and
another long story, but I think it's pertinent to how I got to where I am. And so years ago, again, I had this guy who tilted and he couldn't get out of it. I mean, I tried all kinds of things. I had him put the club across his shoulders.
Right.
Tried to train him to do it correctly, and he just kept going back and tilting his shoulders, and his hips slid out. It was awful. Couldn't get him to stop. So I had him hold the club, and I said, I want you to pretend like this is a punch bowl, and I want you to really take a real slow backswing and don't spill the punch, right? So if he tilts, obviously, you spill the punch. So it worked. It was like perfect. It's like, and then I put the club in his hand. I said, okay, now don't spill the punch. Turn back and don't spill the punch. And he did a really nice backswing.
Right.
So the next day, what do you think I did? I went out and bought a punch bowl.
Yeah.
I go, this worked so well, I needed this prop.
So that was your first training aid in this studio full of all sorts of odd objects.
Right.
The punch bowl
was actually my first training aid.
That's great.
And then along with that, I got a medicine ball. I used to turn a bag pick up their bag of clubs, and I'd have them hold it with their elbows in, and then practice turning and sitting into the trail leg. I mean, all the stuff that we learn about how to transfer and use the ground correctly. I was starting to do way back then, but and then I got medicine balls, and then I got the T-ball. So I started adding all these things. And one time I was given a lesson, and I had a medicine ball. I had this woman, and she was taking a lesson from me. She was standing in front of me. She used to straighten her trail leg. So during the backswing, she stood up, right? A common problem. So I had her stand in front of a mirror, hold a medicine ball, and turn and learn to squat into her trail knee, or trail hip, or whatever you want to call it. Had her feeling like she was sitting down as she turned. And again, you have to do the opposite of what they're doing wrong. So if you're standing up, you don't realize you're straightening. So if you tell someone to sit down, you actually want to feel like you're getting lower during the backswing. They'll stay the same height. So I had her doing that, and she goes, "You do the same thing I do." I said, "What? What do you do?" And she goes, "I'm a physical therapist. I work down at Emory Hospital." And she goes, "This is muscle training." I said, "Really?" I said, "What do you call it?" She goes, "We call it proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation." And I go, "Ooh, wow, that's cool. I got to find out more about that." So. We had a conversation after the lesson, and she told me about her director of physical therapy down there was Cheryl Wardlaw. So I went down there and actually made an appointment to see her, and it turned into a teaching situation. She actually asked me to come down and teach golf to all the physical therapist team down there. So while I was down there, I picked their brains as well. And I found out a lot of interesting things that has affected my golf teaching all the way up to this day. And I would say, I hate to say this, but Cheryl Wardlaw, the director of physical therapy at Emory, probably taught me more about training and teaching golf than any golf instructor I've ever talked to. So I will we'll go through this. Will probably take up the whole show, but we'll end the show on these two stories. And one of the stories was that she had a paraplegic come into her one time, and she looked at the guy, and he'd been diagnosed to never move again from the neck down. So I'm sorry, he's a quadriplegic.
Right.
And two doctors said you'll never walk again, never move from the neck down. And they wheeled him into her, and she looked at him, and Mr. Johnson, she says, some name, Mr. Johnson, I'm going to assume that you're capable of full bodily function until you prove to me that you can't. So she didn't treat him like a quadriplegic. She treated him like a normal human being.
Right.
And I'm sure he appreciated that, but that's the way she had to look at it. Otherwise, what's she going to do?
Yeah.
She's just going to say, yeah, you're a quadriplegic, see you later.
Right.
Right? So it affected me in the way that I look at students who walk into me. So if people walk into me walking on two legs and swinging two arms, I look at them like they can probably do what I want them to do. I'm going to assume that they can do everything I ask them to do until they prove to me that they can't.
Yep.
Okay, so all this physical therapy stuff and all of this, the TPI training you went through.
Right.
I kind of get that, but I think that people are capable of things.
Yeah.
And if you give them a chance, people will prove to you that they can do things.
And TPI is actually big on the screening. That's what they teach us in level 1. The initial screening you should do, and I kind of think that the screening should be looking at the swing. Right. Rather than going ahead and jumping into the screening first. We should look at the swing. Let's say. So
you can make an assumption from looking at the swing.
Let's say, they get early extension through the ball. You could kind of make an assumption that maybe their hip flexors are tight or their ankle mobility. They even go as far as saying their ankle mobility can be tight. But if you actually guide them through the motion, and you could possibly teach them to swing correctly and not early extend through the ball without doing all these sort of corrective exercises that TPI prescribes.
Because the golf swing is kind of an exercise, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And, the golf swing is the action in its most specific form.
Right.
Right?
There you go.
So we don't want to drift away from that if that works. Now, if it doesn't work, if we keep on trying to teach the golf swing and they keep on early extending, then we lose specificity a little bit, and we go down that spectrum until we end up at the TPI exercises that are great,
Right.
But we don't want to jump right to that when we could go with the most specific option.
Right.
Yep,
I would agree with that.
Right.
So the second thing that I thought was fascinating about going down there and working with Cheryl was that she had all this equipment, and I remember, believe it or not, this was like 27 years ago I went down there. They had a balance machine, which is, we saw the body track this morning, and a lot of people know what the body track is, and the weight transfer, the transfer plates, the weight plates that people stand on when they're hitting golf balls, and you can get all this data and information about how you're using the ground.
It's such a cool piece of
machinery.
It's
great stuff. So they actually had one of those that they were using to help, stroke patients rehabilitate, or someone who's lost the ability to balance themselves.
And we were even talking to a rep, someone that tears an ACL, and they need to learn how to jump again using both feet, because it might favor the healthy leg rather than the unhealthy leg. So, the body track's great for that.
Right. So I was down there looking, and they had a room full. I mean, we've got 5,000 square foot here, but this room that they were in, it seemed like it was 10,000 square feet. It was just chock full of all this interesting computerized and machinery for rehabilitation of physical therapy patients. And it was Emory, so they had plenty of money to spend on this stuff. So after I saw the balance machine, I thought, well, that's really cool. I'm sure there's some uses for that for golf, and this was way before they even thought about using that for golf. I asked Cheryl, I said, can you take me around and show me some of this other equipment? And she looked at me and she goes, Don, they bought $8 million worth of stuff last year, and she goes, I don't know what half of it does. She says, what could be better than this? And she held up her two hands. And she goes, when I'm working with a patient, I can push and pull and tug. I can feel things. I can respond very quickly if I can feel something that goes wrong, then I stop. So
Yeah.
as soon as you said that, I recognize the same thing is true in golf. It's like you can have all the thousands of dollars and millions or whatever training tools and devices and computers and weight transfer plates and everything, and you'll never be able to help someone as much as you can with two hands.
Yeah.
A knowledgeable teacher with a good pair of hands
Right.
can push and pull and tug on people and get them to feel and understand things much more quickly than a computer can.
And all the technology is kind of just icing on the cake.
It's data collection.
Right.
It helps you prove your points.
Now, for the PGA Tour player who's already on the way end of the spectrum where they're an incredible golfer, all that data might be necessary. But for someone just learning the game, a good instructor can do just as well.
Right. You got to look at the tour and you got to say, okay, well, there's different types of players, different types of personalities. Someone like that Bryson DeChambeau who just won, they're talking about how technical he is about everything in the swing. It's like he's so technical with his putting and everything. And someone like Bubba Watson is like, I don't want to know anything.
Right.
Or Boo Weekley.
Right.
Boo Weekley would look at you, like you're crazy.
I think Boo Weekley's a great example because he has a fantastic swing.
Oh.
Everything is phenomenal
I think
and technically correct, but he doesn't care.
Yeah, I think yeah, there you go. I think everybody, most golf instructors agree, and most tour players will tell you, Boo Weekley's he's one of the best ball strikers out there.
Right.
When Tim Simpson played, he was one of the better ball strikers out there, and a lot of people would have agreed with that. I mean, there's people who just they have an easy way about the golf course because they hit it straight. Yeah, I think Boo Weekley's one of the best ball strikers out there. I think most of the guys on tour. They would tell you that. They recognize good ball striking.
Oh, yeah.
And Tim Simpson, when he played, he was one of the best ball strikers out there.
And people think they're naturals, and they're just a natural born talent. But like we were talking about earlier, we don't know if what type of background they had. I like to imagine that it was just the perfect assortment of playing the correct junior golf and finding the right coaches and playing other sports that helped perfectly, that just made a perfect career for Boo and Tim Simpson.
Yep, I think so. Well, Justin, I think we're running out of time here,
yep.
And I think this was a great segment. I appreciate you taking the time to kind of interview me and ask me about my background, but I think your turn's next, so tune in next time, and I'm going to ask Justin a few questions, and he can tell you he's got a little bit different background than most golf instructors or professionals, and I think you'll be very interested to hear what he has to say.
You've been watching a Swing Factory Golf Show. I'm Justin Masinko.
And Don Peterson. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.